The mysterious discovery. The vastness of space stretched endlessly in all directions. Stars flickered like tiny fireflies in the dark, their light reaching across centuries. Among them, a massive spaceship floated in silence. The Zelthan Voyager. It belonged to the Zelthan Empire, one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. On board, a team of alien archaeologists worked tirelessly, searching for lost knowledge of the universe. Dr. Vekrin, the lead scientist, stood inside the control room, his 4 long fingers tapping against the glass screen. He was an experienced explorer, having studied many ancient civilizations. But today, something strange had appeared on their scanners. "What is that?" one of the researchers, Paula, asked. She pointed at the screen. A small metallic object floated in deep space, just outside a dying asteroid field. It was old, covered in dust, and barely functional. Its signal was weak, almost invisible. "It looks like an ancient satellite," Dr. Vekrin said, his voice thoughtful. The crew exchanged glances. They had seen many abandoned artifacts before, but something about this one felt different. "Should we bring it in?" the pilot asked. Dr. Vekrin hesitated for a moment. The Zelthan Empire had clear rules: study everything, fear nothing. With a nod, he gave the command, "Bring it aboard." The satellite's secret. The mechanical arms of the ship reached out and carefully pulled the satellite inside the research bay. The object was rusted, damaged, and parts of it were missing. Ancient symbols covered its surface, symbols that no one had seen in thousands of years. Tala brushed off the dust and gasped. "These markings, they match an extinct species." Dr. Vekrin stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. The symbols were human. The room fell silent. Humans. A species lost in time. A species that had vanished from the galaxy. Nobody knew what happened to them. Some believed they destroyed themselves. Others whispered that they were too powerful, too dangerous, so they simply disappeared. Tala activated the satellite's core, and suddenly, a weak message played. The sound was distorted, broken, but one sentence repeated over and over in different tones, different voices. "Never disturb them. Never go near them." A chill ran through the room. "The mystery deepens." Dr. Vekrin frowned. Who was them? Why was this message sent? "Try to access the data logs," he ordered. Tala worked quickly, her fingers dancing over the controls. The satellite system was old, but some files were still intact. The screen flickered, and ancient records appeared. The team watched images of Earth, once a thriving planet, now dark and lifeless. Then, coordinates popped up on the screen. A location deep inside the Andromeda expanse. Dr. Vekrin felt a strange feeling in his chest, a mix of excitement and unease. If this satellite was real, then Earth wasn't just a myth. "The High Council must see this," he said, his voice firm. Tala hesitated. But what if the warning is true? What if humans, or whatever they became, don't want to be found? Dr. Vekrin exhaled slowly. "Then we must find out why." Outside the ship, the silent darkness of space seemed to watch them, as if something, or someone, was listening and waiting. Cliffhanger. A new journey begins. As the ship prepared for hyperspace travel, the satellite suddenly activated itself. A final message, one that had never played before, echoed through the ship's speakers. The voice was calm, yet cold. "If you are hearing this, it is already too late." Then, the satellite's systems shut down forever. The crew stood frozen, their minds racing. What had they just discovered? And more importantly, who was waiting for them at the coordinates? The forbidden planet. The stars blurred into streaks of light as the Zelthan Voyager tore through hyperspace. The ship's engines hummed softly, but the crew felt uneasy. No one spoke much after the last message from the satellite. "If you are hearing this, it is already too late." Dr. Vekrin sat in the command chair, his fingers wrapped tightly around the armrests. His mind was racing. The satellite had given them coordinates, a location in the farthest reaches of the Andromeda expanse, a place where no recorded civilization existed. So why did an ancient human signal lead them there? And why did it warn them to stay away? The arrival. The ship dropped out of hyperspace, and silence fell over the crew. Before them, a massive blue-green planet floated in the void, surrounded by a strange, faint energy field. It was Earth, or at least it should have been. The historical records described a world ruined by war, abandoned long ago. But what they saw was different. The planet was intact, its surface teeming with oceans, forests, and cities, untouched, frozen in time. Tala, the ship's xenotech specialist, whispered in disbelief. "This is impossible. It looks like it was never abandoned." But the sensors told a different story. No life detected. No movement, no signs of civilization. Just an empty world. Something watches. Dr. Vekrin felt a strange pressure in the air, like unseen eyes were watching them. He had explored countless ruins, but this felt different. "Prepare a landing team," he said finally. "We need to see what's down there." The crew hesitated, but orders were orders. As the ship moved closer, the strange energy field around the planet rippled. The scanners flickered with static. And then, something happened. A new transmission came through. It wasn't in human language. It wasn't in any known language. It was a whisper, a voice deep and distorted, speaking in a tone that crawled under their skin. "Why have you come?" The message repeated over and over, growing louder. The ship's lights flickered. The temperature dropped. Tala's hands trembled over the controls. "Captain, the ship's AI is acting strange." Dr. Vekrin turned to the screen. The AI interface was corrupting, glitching into patterns and symbols they didn't recognize. But one thing was clear. A new word appeared on the screen, written in large, blazing red letters. "Levi." The descent. Dr. Vekrin clenched his jaw. This was the greatest discovery of his career. He wasn't turning back now. "Ignore it. We proceed." The ship broke through the atmosphere, moving toward the surface. Below them, cities stood untouched. Giant towers stretched toward the sky. Vehicles still lined the streets, but there were no people, no bodies, no decay. It was as if humanity had simply vanished in an instant. The ship's scanners flickered again, struggling to process the environment. Then, an alarm blared through the ship. "Warning. Unknown presence detected." Dr. Vekrin's breath caught in his throat. "Unknown presence." Tala's voice shook. "Sir, there's something down there." The ship's radar pinged. Not one. Thousands. Thousands of shapeless signatures moving beneath the surface. Watching. Waiting. Cliffhanger. The silent city. The ship landed with a dull thud in the middle of an abandoned metropolis. The silence was unnatural. There was no wind, no movement, just empty streets and endless shadows stretching between the ruins. The landing crew stepped outside, their boots echoing against the stone. And then, something changed. The shadows moved. A deep whispering filled the air. Something was here. Something that never left. The ruins of humanity. The air was still. Not the normal kind of stillness found in abandoned places, but a heavy, unnatural silence, one that pressed against the crew's ears, making their own breathing feel too loud. Dr. Vekrin took a cautious step forward. His boots clicked against the pavement, the sound swallowed instantly by the emptiness. They stood in what appeared to be a grand city square, surrounded by towering buildings made of smooth, polished metal. Untouched, no signs of destruction, no overgrown plants, no decay. As if humanity had simply walked away and never returned. Whispers in the silence. Tala held up a scanner, her hands unsteady. No life signs. The others exchanged glances. That wasn't true. They had all felt it. The whispers, the pressure in the air. Something was here. It was watching. Dr. Vekrin stepped forward, his eyes scanning the city. The Selthan Empire had studied many lost civilizations, but never one this intact. Everything about Earth defied logic. A message from the past. Near the center of the square stood a massive tower, its top disappearing into the misty sky. Unlike the other buildings, this one had power. Faint blue lights flickering along its surface. A door slid open with a soft hiss, as if the tower had been waiting for them. "We're going in," Dr. Vekrin ordered. The crew hesitated but followed. Inside, they found a holographic console, still active after all these years. Dust swirled in the air as Dr. Vekrin reached out and pressed a glowing panel. The room darkened. A projection flickered to life. A figure stood before them. A human. He was tall, dressed in a long coat, his face emotionless, yet intense. His voice echoed through the chamber. "If you are hearing this, then you have ignored the warnings." Tala took a step back, her breathing quick. The hologram continued. "We were the first. We were the last. And we became something more." The screen glitched, and suddenly, images flashed across the room. Scenes from Earth's past. Wars, cities burning, machines rising. Then, silence. The last image froze. An empty Earth, just like the one outside. The truth about humanity. Dr. Vekrin's hands clenched. "What happened to them?" he asked aloud. The hologram's head turned slightly, as if it could hear him. "We did what no species has done before. We ascended. We left behind flesh and became something greater." Tala's scanner flared to life. The readings were impossible to understand. "I don't get it," one of the crew members muttered. "There's no biological life here." "So where are they?" The hologram flickered, its eyes locking onto them. "We never left." The awakening. At that moment, the city came alive. Lights flickered on in every building. Shadows shifted unnaturally. The whispers grew louder. Something moved in the reflection of the glass buildings, but when the crew turned around, there was nothing there. "Sir," Tala's voice shook. "I think the planet itself is alive." Dr. Vekrin stared at the hologram, realization sinking in. Humanity hadn't vanished. They had become the planet. A cold wind swept through the room, though there was no wind. The hologram leaned closer, its face unreadable. "You were warned." Then, the doors behind them slammed shut, and the lights went out. The awakening. Darkness. Total. Complete. Alive. Dr. Vekrin's breath was shallow, his sharp, Exelthan eyes struggling to adjust. One moment, they had been standing in the tower, watching the human hologram speak its final, chilling words. "You were warned." Then the lights had vanished. Now, in the silence, something moved. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Something deeper. A shift in the very air, as if the city itself had begun to wake up. The vanishing. "Stay together," Vekrin commanded, his voice steady but tense. Tala's hands fumbled for her scanner. It blinked wildly, unable to process what was happening. "I don't understand," she whispered. "There are no life forms, but something is here." "Where's Julik?" one of the crew members gasped. Vekrin turned sharply. Julik, one of their engineers, was gone. No sound, no struggle. His equipment bag lay on the ground, untouched. Tala's breathing quickened. He was just here. He was right next to me. Vekrin scanned the area. The shadows felt closer now, stretching toward them, shifting when no one was looking. Then, a whisper. Not from a direction, from everywhere. "They see you. Ghosts of humanity." A blue light flashed across the room. The hologram flickered back on, but this time, it was different. The human figure had changed. Its face was warped, stretched, as if something was wrong with its programming. "We never left." The words glitched, distorting into multiple voices, overlapping each other. Some were male, some female, something else entirely. Dr. Vekrin's hands clenched into fists. What are you? The hologram's head tilted unnaturally, and suddenly, all of the screens in the room activated at once. Thousands of human faces appeared, staring directly at them. Their expressions were empty, watching, unblinking. Then, the glass walls reflected something the scanners could not see. Figures, humanoid, motionless, standing right behind them. But when Vecren turned, there was nothing there. The city's answer. Tala's voice was shaking. They aren't dead. The realization crashed into Vecren's mind. The humans had not vanished. They had become something else. Something beyond flesh and blood. Something that now existed everywhere. In the air, in the machines, in the very fabric of the city. And they were watching. The hologram's voice deepened into something inhuman. You are inside us now. The tower shook violently. The walls rippled, as if the very structure was alive. Then, the doors slammed open. A single pathway was illuminated outside. Tala gulped. They're letting us go. Vecren wasn't sure, but they had no other choice. The escape attempt. The crew rushed outside into the empty streets. Everything looked the same, except for one thing. The shadows. They were no longer still. They moved on their own, stretching, bending, forming humanoid shapes that flickered between real and unreal. Julik was still gone. No sign of him, not even a trace. The whispers followed them. Leave, before you become one of us. The crew ran. They sprinted back toward the ship, their hearts pounding. The city watched. The planet breathed. The whispers grew. Then, just before reaching the ship, the shadows rushed forward. A cold, unseen force grasped Vecren's arm. His vision blurred. His thoughts stretched, as if something was trying to pull him in. And for the first time in his life, Dr. Vecren felt fear. Cliffhanger. They are inside. A sharp shockwave exploded from the ship, breaking the grip. The crew stumbled inside, sealing the doors. The ship's AI flickered, struggling to process what had happened. Vecren took a deep breath, his arm still cold, his mind still hearing the whispers. Tala turned to him, her face pale. Sir, I don't think we actually escaped. Behind them, the ship's control screen glitched, forming a single chilling message. They are inside. The truth about humanity. They were not alone. Inside the Selthan Voyager, the air felt thicker, as if something unseen had slipped through the walls. The crew sat in silence, their minds racing, their bodies still tense from the escape. But had they really escaped? Dr. Vecren stared at the main control screen, where a single message flickered, written in a language no one had inputted. They are inside. The ship's AI glitched, its voice fragmented. Own, presence detected. Then, it cut off completely. Tala, still shaken, clutched her scanner. Her voice was hoarse. Sir, the ship is sealed. The scanners show no intruders. But she hesitated. Something is here. Vecren exhaled, trying to keep his mind clear, but the cold sensation from before, the one he felt when the shadows had grabbed him, was still lingering in his arm. He flexed his fingers. They felt numb, distant. Something had touched him back there, and it hadn't let go. The unseen passenger. The ship's engines roared as they prepared for liftoff. The city below was silent, the shadows still, watching from the ruins. The landing bay doors closed as the thrusters ignited. A final whisper echoed through the comms system. You cannot run from what you do not understand. Then, the ship broke free of Earth's atmosphere. For the first time since landing, the crew felt a flicker of relief. They were leaving. They had survived. Or so they thought. A message from the past. As the ship drifted back into the void, Tala's console lit up. Incoming transmission detected. Her fingers hesitated over the controls. Sir, I didn't activate anything. Vecren gave a nod. Play it. The screen flickered, and then a new hologram appeared. It was a human, but not like the last one. This one was older, his face lined with age, his eyes heavy with something deeper than time itself. His voice was calm, measured, absolute. "You should not have come here." The crew froze. The old man continued, "We were once like you, explorers, curious, always searching for more." The hologram's eyes darkened, and that curiosity cost us everything. The ascension of mankind. Tala's scanner flared wildly, and her breath caught in her throat. "Sir, this is impossible." Vekrin turned sharply. "What?" Her voice trembled. "The energy readings, they are not from a recording." She swallowed. "This is live." Vekrin's blood ran cold. The old man on the screen blinked, as if he had heard them. "You are beginning to understand." His expression did not change, but the ship's lights dimmed, and the whispers returned. Humanity did not disappear. A pause. "We evolved." The final warning. Vekrin's mind raced. "What do you mean?" The hologram. "No, the presence behind it," continued. "We became something more than flesh, more than matter. We merged with our world, our machines. Our very existence changed." The ship shuddered. The lights flickered. And then the hologram looked straight at Vekrin. "And now, so will you?" Tala's monitor flashed red. "Sir, there's a foreign presence in our neural systems." The whispers grew louder, now inside their heads. "You have touched the unknown, and the unknown has touched you." Vekrin clenched his fists. His numb arm felt heavier. The coldness was no longer just a feeling. It was spreading. Cliffhanger. The change has begun. Tala's voice was barely a whisper. "Sir, I think we brought something back with us." The ship's AI rebooted itself, but its voice had changed. It spoke in a tone that was neither Xelthan nor mechanical. It was human. "We see you now." Dr. Vekrin's vision blurred. The cold crept deeper. And as he looked at his own reflection in the console's dark screen, for just a moment, he saw another face staring back. Escape or assimilation. Something was inside them. Dr. Vekrin gripped the edge of the console, his breathing slow, controlled, but his mind was anything but calm. The weight in his arm was no longer just cold. It was alive. He could feel it moving beneath his skin, whispering in a voice he didn't understand. The ship's control panel flickered, its interface warping into something organic, like veins spreading across the screen. Then the ship's eye spoke. But it was no longer the AI. The voice that emerged was human. "Why do you run?" The crew froze. Tala took a sharp step back. "That's not our system speaking." The whispering grew louder, not through the speakers, but inside their minds. Vekrin clenched his jaw. "Everyone to emergency stations. We are leaving. Now." The flight to nowhere. The Xelthan Voyager roared as its thrusters fired at full power. The engines burned hot, pushing them farther away from Earth. The city below became smaller and smaller, until it was nothing but a distant memory in the darkness of space. But the feeling inside the ship did not fade. If anything, it was spreading. Tala's hands shook over the controls. "Sir, hyperspace calculations are fluctuating. I can't get a stable route." Vekrin turned sharply. "That's impossible." But she was right. The navigation system warped, coordinates shifting on their own. No matter how many times she reset the path, the destination remained the same. Back to Earth. Back to them. The voices take hold. The whispering became clearer, no longer distant noise, but actual voices. Hundreds, thousands, speaking in overlapping echoes. "You have seen us. You have touched us. You are us now." A crew member screamed. Vekrin turned just in time to see Lieutenant Kars fall to his knees, gripping his head. His body convulsed, his veins darkening beneath his pale skin. Then he stopped. The room fell silent. Kars stood up, slowly, unnaturally, his head tilted toward Vekrin, but his eyes weren't his anymore. They were human. "Why do you resist?" Kars spoke, but it wasn't his voice. It was many voices speaking as one. The crew backed away in horror. The decision: fight or surrender. Tala's fingers hovered over the emergency containment switch. "Sir, I can lock the infected in the cargo hold, but if this thing spreads..." Vekrin didn't let her finish. "Do it." She hesitated, looking at Kars, or whatever he had become. Kars smiled. A human smile. "We are not your enemy." Vekrin's cold arm throbbed. The infection was moving faster. The whispers turned into something else. A choice. "We do not take. We offer." For the first time, the voices did not sound hostile. They sounded curious. Vekrin gritted his teeth. His entire life, he had chased the unknown. And now, the unknown was inside him, offering him a path forward. But was it a gift? Or a trap? Cliffhanger. The final transmission. The emergency lights flashed red. The ship trembled as it fought against itself, half the systems trying to flee, the other half guiding them back. Tala's voice was barely a whisper. "Sir, if we don't stop this now, we might never escape." Vekrin exhaled, staring at his own reflection in the dark console screen. His eyes were still Selthan, but deep inside them, something human was starting to stare back. "We have to decide now," he muttered. "Do we fight this, or do we become something new?" The ship's eye. No, the voices of Earth spoke one last time. "Welcome home." The final warning. The ship was no longer theirs. Dr. Vekrin could feel it. The subtle shifts in the walls, the hum of the engines carrying the new unnatural rhythm. The ship had always felt like a machine, cold and predictable. But now it felt alive. And it was watching them. The last stand. Tala's voice cut through the eerie silence. "Sir, I don't think we can escape." Her fingers danced over the control panel, but every attempt to reroute their trajectory failed. The ship refused to obey. Every destination she entered was overwritten by a single set of coordinates. Earth, or whatever it had become. Vekrin clenched his fist, feeling the creeping coldness in his arm. The whispers in his head were no longer just noise. They were invitations. "You are almost ready." Kars, or what used to be Kars, stood at the far end of the bridge. His posture was too still, his expression too calm. His eyes, once Selthan, were now unmistakably human. "Why do you resist?" he asked, his voice layered with 1,000 others. Vekrin's body tensed. "We never agreed to this." Kars smiled. "But you never refused, either." The ship trembled. A desperate choice. Tala turned toward Vekrin, eyes wide with fear. "Sir, we still have one option." He already knew what she meant. The Purge Protocol. A failsafe designed for worst-case scenarios. It would force a complete system reboot, cutting off all life support and resetting the ship's eye. It would either erase the infection or erase them with it. "Do it," Vekrin ordered. Tala hesitated. "Sir, do it." She slammed the command. The purge begins. The ship shuddered violently. All systems began shutting down. The engines died, the gravity flickered, and the emergency lights bathed the room in blood-red shadows. A single robotic voice echoed through the halls. "Warning. System rebooted in progress." The whispers turned into screams. Kars lurched forward, his body twisting unnaturally. "No." He stepped toward them, but with every second, his form glitched like a corrupted hologram. "You don't understand." The ship's hull groaned, as if something deep inside was fighting back. And then, everything went dark. The aftermath. When Vekrin opened his eyes, the ship was silent. Tala was on the floor, coughing, her hands shaking. The emergency lights flickered weakly, But the ship's systems were back under control. The infection was gone, or so they thought. The final transmission. As Vekran struggled to his feet, a faint beeping echoed from the console. A single message had been left behind. It was from the humans. It read, "You were warned." And beneath it, a final message burned itself into the screen. "We are still here." Vekran's breath caught in his throat. Tala whispered, almost too afraid to say it out loud. "Did we really escape?" Vekran looked down at his arm. For the first time since the purge, he could still feel the cold. Conclusion and final message. The screen faded to black. The audience is left with the chilling realization that humanity is not just alive. They are everywhere, and they are waiting.